Hi guys. Hope I haven't left you hanging too long. It's only been 24 hours, Actually longer. I went to bed later tonight. Anyway, last night I was not very composed for a myriad of reasons. One was being worried about Coco. Um, Spoiler alert, she's fine. We'll get into that in a minute. Um, aside from being old. But again, we'll get into that in a minute. But one of the reasons I was rattled is late last night I was feeling just overall kind of crap. I think sinuses and stuff, plus everything going on with the dog, and just in general, my mood was down. And anytime I'm like that, I can let the smallest things get to me. Um, so like, mom come in and half berated me about dishes, and she had every right to do so. Make no mistake. Um, I was more annoyed that I was annoyed because, if that makes sense, when you just have like a gut check reaction and you're like, that's stupid. You know what I mean? Um, which I wasn't short with or anything. It just, it was one of those things where she left and I was just kind of about it. And then I was like, I have zero right. So anyway, it's 12:30. I'm doing dishes. I got my phone running, auto running some battles in the Siege of Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. I don't know why I insist on saying the whole damn name every time. Probably because it's a bit ridiculous. Just a little crazy. Um, I'm fairly sure a few of those words don't mean anything. Anyway, and my hands are wet, so like my phone goes off like 2 or 3 times in a row. At a that again, half past midnight. So I'm like, okay. So I finished unloading the dishwasher because I don't like messing with stuff while I'm doing that because I don't have to wash my hands again. And I check, and I've got a few emails. I'm like, oh boy. And I sit down, and it looks like I passed the first round of screening for one of the post office positions I applied for. And I'm at this point like refusing to accept it. As far as, no, there's no way I finally got picked up by somebody, especially when I saw that the offering starting rate, even though I would only be part time, was uh, like a solid $10 more an hour than I've ever made. So instead of making $8 an hour, which that was like at its peak, what I made an hour, I would be making like 18.25 an hour. Oh, I'm like, no, it's not going to happen. I refuse to believe it's going to happen. I'm going to bed. And that kind of led to my general despondent state last night. When I get up today, um, I say get up. It's 8 in the morning. I'm like hopping off of like basically a night nap. As far as, I used to do this a lot more often, where I'd sleep roughly halfway through my cycle or the night or whatever, wake up, and then sleep again. And it hasn't been happening lately. Like, thankfully, I figured I was past that. And last night I slept very sporadically. At first it was like hour at a time until like 4 or 5, and then I like actually fell asleep until like 8. and then I rolled over at 8, and for some reason, just I really had to piss, and so I was upset with that. I'm like, fuck, now I gotta go. So I get up, walk through the den, you know, mom's crying, and I'm like, oh god, what happened? And it turns out she was just crying over the news. Sure. I was worried it was the dog. Which I guess I should back up and explain a little more. So I think I talked about at some point, and if I didn't, I'm just going to go back to the beginning. Spoiler warning, there's a little bit of gross in here, especially as the further I get into it. So, you know, I'll warn again before the extra gross happens. Not that I'll be able to describe it in detail, because I know about the gross secondhand, so maybe that helps. About a week ago, we noticed that Coco's face was swollen on one side. And, you know, obviously immediately concerned, but a little extra concerned because we've been dealing with, like, well, we know what it is now, but we've been dealing with, like, an 8-month-long battle to find out what's going on with her ears. They reek to high hell sometime. Like, they require regular maintenance, which isn't entirely uncommon in floppier dogs, if that makes sense. And, you know, like, dogs that have perked ears have less ear trouble because, you know, their ears are kind of open to the air and don't turn into dank, moist caves where horrible things can grow. But, like, we're talking, like, we could clean our ears really, really good. And, or, like, we could, like, even when we took her to the vet, and they would flush her with, like, you know, with stuff that could get all the way down in there and all that good stuff. They'd be stinking again within the hour. So ultimately, we finally found out, like, you know, we tried the general stuff that, you know, should work. It didn't, which is fine, you know. You don't, like, you know, if you go in with the sniffles, that might not be the best thing right now. If you go in with a stomach ache, the doctors don't immediately jump to gastro and, you know, like, stomach cancer just because your tummy hurts. So, like, it would have been like doing that. But anyway, so after months and months and months of fighting with this and not getting anywhere, they're like, okay, we're stumped. We've tried everything. We're going to take a sample of this and send it off to a specialty facility that will analyze it, find out what is living in your dog's ears, and then they will send that analysis to another company who will mix up a perfect formula to deal with whatever this is. So we finally heard back about 2 weeks ago that she had 5 different types of bacteria living in her ears. Oh, that explains a lot. And so, you know, luckily earlier this week we got the vials and everything. But anyway, her face is swollen up. It's on the side with the bad ear. We are obviously concerned. You know, I do some swift Google. Well, I accidentally stopped recording. Great, that just made tonight a lot more aggravating. Anyway, I do some swift Googling, and the general consensus is it's allergies. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably it, because she's literally on, will you please, thank you, because she's literally on, I'm fighting with the focus lock. She's literally on like allergy medicine it will be for the rest of her life. I'm like, it's probably just that. Uh, Extreme level 2 was like trauma, and I'm like, there's no. Even though it is her bad eye, I think we would have noticed if she thunked hard enough to swell up the entire right side of her head. Um, Below that was uh, some sort of bite, be it insect, spider, or snake, and I'm like pretty sure we would have known if it was a snake. Could have been a bee. We don't know. Maybe she's extremely allergic to bees. She probably would be. And then down at the bottom was tumor, and I'm like, oh God, please no. But um, like I did some extra reading on that, and that was like if the swelling was slowly increasing over weeks to months, and this is a very new problem. Not to mention, you don't have 5 types of bacteria living in that side of your head, then have that side of your head swell up, and those two not be related somehow. So I know that because I know the vet was just being thorough and telling us everything it could be, so as not to have to like surprise us with tumor. But in the back of my head, I was pretty convinced it wasn't that. Not that I still wasn't concerned. Well, that brings us to where we were yesterday, or the day before yesterday, where she was hassling really, really bad, and to the point where he had actually kept mom and dad up most of that would have been Monday night. It's Wednesday. Yeah, Monday night. So first thing Tuesday morning, they take her up to the vet, and the vet keeps her. They put her on fluids because she didn't really want to eat, and they like put her on an IV of like nutrition and antibiotics, and we find out she's running a fever. I don't know why I've ever considered it's one of those things that it's like, well, obviously dogs can run a fever, but I've never really thought about that. So, and the last thing we'd heard the night before was that she seemed to be more comfortable. The fever was down, but the swelling hadn't really gone away. But they did find an abscess, and this is where it gets kind of gross. But again, I can't really describe it in detail because I wasn't there, haven't seen her. But they were doing a thorough inspection of her bad ear, and they found an abscess. If you're not entirely familiar with an abscess, I have a vague concept of them, and it's basically a pit formed somewhere in the body, kind of like around a foreign object. One of the best explanations I know, because it was kind of the way I was introduced to the concept, is like sometimes pack animals that eat like seeds and stuff get them stuck between their teeth, and they can't do anything like that about that, and so it just kind of stays there, and then it gets infected, and then the infection starts like eating a hole, or something similar to that. And so they found one of those in Coco's ear. They lanced it, which is a hell of a term, isn't it? And apparently got, to quote the vet, a lot of yucky stuff out of it. And I'm immediately like, yeah, that's got to be what all this problem is. But we weren't, she was still being cautious at the time. Don't blame her. So, that's a lot of where my mind was last night. Wake up at 8 o'clock today. She says, mom said she's gonna wait till 9:30 to call back. I tell her to come in my room whenever she does, stick her head in and see if I'm still awake. I was. Uh, Listened to her talk, and she said that, the vet said that Coco seemed to be doing much, much better. In fact, they were taking her off of IV fluids because she was eating again happily. And like, Coco's the type of dog that you could be holding her underwater and you hold food in front of her and she will probably drown trying to get to the food. So for her not to be eating was scary. So, and we figured that was probably the fever. Like, that's the only way I can see her not eating. Like, she had to, like, feel bad. Like, I feel like she could be in excruciating pain, and she would still go out of her way to stand in the kitchen and watch people prepare food, you know? We just starve her that bad. You should call defects. Anyway, so that makes me feel a little better, and I'm able to sleep until about 1 o'clock, or no, until about noon when I get on up. And then I had a cleaning today. First time in a long time. I gave in and let Mom schedule it because I've got a sharp spot on a tooth that I figure is a filling falling out or something along those lines, and I want to get it dealt with before it's a problem for once, because I've had enough tooth pain to last me a lifetime. So, but to be fair, while the first one was my fault, the second one wasn't. Like, the tooth had not externally deteriorated again, just the core, like the root of it never healed, and it caused an infection. So that one wasn't entirely my negligence. It just came out of nowhere and was miserable. I thought having a tooth on the bottom was bad. No. Having a top tooth that hurts is absolute torture, because it just shoots right up to your brain. Like, it felt like someone was driving a nail up into my skull. And no, I'm not dealing with that again. So I'm like, that's a little sharp. I need to go in and get seen. And sure enough, he does want to do something about it. But it turns out it might not be a filling falling out, but actually the tooth in front of it chipped. Which, fuck if I know how that happened. But anyway, other than that, I had like a glowing review from the lady that did my cleaning, which, like, who can say that? Like, I feel like dentists aren't doing their job if they can't find a place to scrutinize you somewhere. But she's like, no, your gums are extremely healthy. They're not bleeding. I can tell you've been flossing, which by flossing, I've been chewing on those. You've probably seen those little hook things. I say hook things. They're like, anyway, they're like, they're easy flossers. And me and my dad both chew on them like toothpicks, which is great, because one, we're flossing, and two, we're not having to. It's just standing over a sink with a string of floss and then digging into my teeth has never been high on my priority list. But sitting in my chair, chewing on a flosser, and, just sometimes when I'm bored and doing something, just kind of, messing around with it, that's gone a long way for me. So if you have trouble flossing and, you don't live in a public space where you will disgust friends and family members, or even if you do, screw it. Your tooth health is probably more important. Keep some of those little things around. If you don't know what I'm talking about, they're a little, think about a plastic toothpick, but on one end it's got a piece like this, like a U, with a little piece of floss strung in between it. And it's really easy to just run it between your teeth. And about the only time they're not effective is if, like my mom, you have bridges in, which is one solution to missing teeth. Like, I think she's missing two on her top, and instead of having two false teeth, she has a bridge. That kind of thing. I'm not really great for that, but for everywhere else, they're wonderful. After that, I get back home, and we call the vet back, and she's like, the good news is I keep finding more abscesses, so I'm pretty sure that's what all of the swelling is. We're like, Jesus Christ, how much? Oh God. It apparently just hit critical mass last week, and that's why it swole up out of nowhere. One of the more troubling things is she did, dog is old. Old dogs have things. One of like the big things for Cocker Spaniels is ultimately they'll develop heart murmurs or heart disease, and that'll eventually be what does them in. So she did an x-ray just to be safe, and she couldn't get a good look of it because of Coco had a little bit of fluid on her lungs. And just like, alright, great, awesome, that's not scary at all. So she gave her something to hopefully deal with that so she can get a better x-ray tomorrow. Which ultimately, regardless, she's probably going to go on some heart medication, whether it's preventive or treatment, doesn't really matter. But even if she's not around much longer, we want to make sure the person about her remaining time is as comfortable as possible. And we think, other than, she had a little bit of a hacking cough, but it didn't seem to deter her any, She was more than happy to follow you around and hack and cough all shot, But anyway, the rest of the day was just more Breath of Fire, Dragon Quarter. I'm not back to where I had to reset yet. But I'm still enjoying just playing it, which is odd, Odd that I haven't gotten sick of it yet, like somehow. So I've got high hopes for attempting to sort of finish it. But anyway, that should hopefully cover the yesterday and today. I'm going to sleep now because it's probably like 2 a.m. Oh, I guarantee, no, more like 2:30. Nope, 2:10. Okay, that's a little better than I expected. Good night. I will see you all tomorrow.